to today's class. For today, I have a set of blocks with me, so if you have a set for yourself, please go ahead and grab them. We're just going to use them for a little bit of support as we flow through today's class. So whenever you have your space to practice in, let's go ahead and meet in a supported bridge. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take one of those blocks right away and bring that in for a little bit of support, a little bit of extra opening within the front of the hips. So start by bringing yourself down to the earth, down to the mat. Take a moment to settle the hips, settle the low back onto the floor beneath you. And then you can go ahead, once you settle for a moment, go ahead and press to the feet, lift those hips up as you place that block underneath the lowest part of your spine. And just take a moment to feel a bit of heaviness onto the block. Resting the hands wherever it comes naturally to you. And if this feels good, you can stay here. Or I invite you to maybe walk the legs out away from you a little bit more, maybe open into the front of those hips. Still finding that heaviness into the heels. That light lift through the front of the hips. And then that heaviness through the upper back, through the back of the skull. And then if you feel comfortable enough, maybe close your eyes. Finding your breath. Letting your mind and body settle into this space. Feeling the supports underneath you, opening through the front body. Maybe feeling a release through the back body. And then maybe finding a little bit more space, more depth through your breath. Again, knees can be bent or straightened here, whatever is most comfortable for you. But we're going to go ahead and take that right knee, wherever it's starting from. We're going to try to bring that in towards your chest. You might feel a little rock backward onto the block. So take it nice and slow. If your legs were extended out in front of you as that right knee comes in, maybe you feel a little bit more opening through the front of that left thigh. Maybe finding a little bit of energy as you reach that left heel out and away from you. Opening a little bit more through the pelvis, through the hips. And then nice and easy, let that right leg go. Maybe for a little bit more comfort, you bring that left knee in to meet it. Bring the left knee in towards the chest before extending that right leg back out nice and long. And as you reach that right leg out, you reach through the heel. You bring that left knee in towards your chest and feel how that lengthens and creates a little bit more space through the front of that right hip. Maybe slide that right foot back in, left foot comes back down to meet the right. And then from here, bring both feet back in towards you. I want you to scoop that tailbone underneath you, bring those hip points up towards you as you lift up and off that block. It's just going to be a small lift. We're already starting a little bit higher from the ground. And then nice and easy, lower from the top down. That sacrum comes back to the block. You fully relax, letting that block support you. And then 2 more rounds. Go ahead and squeeze the muscles in the back of your tush. Go ahead and lift the front of the hips up towards the sky. And exhale, lower down, settle. 1 more. Go ahead and lift. Pressing through the feet, squeezing through the back of the hips, opening through the front. And then go ahead and remove that block and lower all the way down, rolling the spine down back towards the floor. And then go ahead and shimmy the knees side to side. And then go ahead and bring the feet a little bit wider from one another. And then keep that wiggle going. Maybe that movement becomes a little bit bigger. Maybe you hold a little bit longer. And feel free to rest the hands on your belly so you give your lower body a little bit more room to roam here. Maybe you're lingering a little bit more to one side as that trailing knee tries to reach toward the opposite foot. Or maybe you linger in the center, maybe trying to drive both knees to opposite poles. Gives you a nice stretch sensation through the inner thighs as you come through the middle. And just play with the movement within your hips. Do what feels good. Linger where you need it. Just a few more breaths here. Working through the kinks, creating space. Maybe that rhythmic motion is what feels good today. Helps get things loosened up. On the next breath or so, you're going to find center. Wiggle those feet back toward one another. Bring the knees in toward the chest for just a moment. And then start to nice and slow, rocking onto sit bones, onto tailbone. Taking a few rounds before we make our way upright. And we're going to bring our blocks. We're going to work with these the majority of the class, so keep them close by. We're going to cross our ankles and then come into a tabletop position. And as your hands come down towards the blocks, coming into your tabletop, finding a nice long spine here. Anytime I get into a new position, sometimes I like to find a nice sway side to side, so feel free to find stillness or some subtle movement as it speaks to you. But as you settle, the spine gets nice and long. You feel your arms get a little bit longer as you press through the palms of the hands, the heels of the hands. You draw the shoulders down and away from your ears. You reach the crown of the head toward the top of the mat. Your gaze is just beyond your fingertips. The tops of the feet are down onto the mat. Tailbone is reaching toward to the back of the mat, between the space between the heels. And just feel what it feels like to feel nice and long in this space. From the armpits to the hip crease, feeling that length there along the side body, the length along the back body, and the subtle lift of the belly button up toward the spine. Take one deep inhale in and open the mouth, exhale. Settling into your shape, deep inhale. And then open the mouth, exhale. Go ahead and seal your lips on your next inhale. Go ahead and lift the tailbone up towards the sky. Drop the belly. Pull the chest, the heart forward as the gaze starts to lift. And then on the exhale, press through the blocks. As you spread the shoulder blades wide, the chin comes towards the chest. You tuck that tailbone closer towards that space between the heels. Inhale, lift, finding your cow pose. Make that movement nice and big. Find as much movement along the spine as you can. And then exhale, reverse. Puff up through the upper back. Really spread those shoulder blades wide. Use the push of the blocks to help you here. Tuck all the way through the tailbone. Inhale. Gaze brings your body forward. Exhale, round. Tucking everything up and underneath you. Inhale, one more round. Making this energetic, trying to create space for yourself. Find movement in areas you don't necessarily focus on. And then exhale, round and hide it all in. Maybe finding a little bit of engagement within the belly. And then you inhale, unravel the spine. On your next inhale, your right leg reaches back behind you, still pushing through those blocks, staying lifted within the chest as that right heel reaches back behind you. Kickstand that left foot toward the left side. Open the body up towards the right side of the room. Using the press through the block to find length across the upper body, reaching that heel towards the back of the mat. And then drop that foot down, reach the right arm up and overhead, lift through that right rib cage, open up. Keeping those hips stacked on top of one another. And then go ahead and reach the right arm back up towards the sky. The outer edge of that right leg lifts back up. And then nice and slow, come back to center. Square everything off. Everything comes back to where we started. And then right foot comes back in. Making our way onto our other side. Go ahead and reintegrate with your tabletop shape. And then on your next inhale, reach that left leg back behind you, keeping that spine nice and long, the hip points facing the floor. And then go ahead and kickstand that right leg back behind you toward that right side. Open everything up towards the left side of the room. The outer edge of that left leg is reaching towards the sky. You're pressing those hip points forward, and you're reaching toward the sky as you press through that block. And then drop the back foot towards the back of the mat. Reach that left arm up and overhead. Feel that length all the way from the fingertips through the rib cage and into the side of the waist. As that arm lifts up back towards the sky, the outer edge of the leg lifts up. And then nice and slow and with control, we find our way back to center. Kickstand that right leg back to neutral. Come back to square the hips. And then the left foot, the left shin comes to meet the right. Go ahead and scooch those blocks up toward the top of the mat. Maybe bring them just a hair wider along the edges. And then tuck the toes, sit the hips up and back. Come into your downward facing dog here. And as you find your downward facing dog, feel how having the blocks underneath you, underneath your hands, changes the sensation of the shape. Making your upper body longer. Do you feel like you're able to get more of a lift through the hips, lift through the tailbone? Maybe you find that you're able to bring your heels towards the mat with a little bit more ease. Wrapping the biceps toward the ears, finding a lot of strength through the shoulder blades as you lift and press through the earth. Feeling that engagement along the spine as that tailbone tries to reach towards the ceiling. And then feeling that length along the backside of the legs. Find your breath, 2 more breaths here. Feeling nice and strong and engaged. And then lift up high onto the toes. Exhale, bend the knees, gaze forward. Then you're to use this little crouched position to spring and roll yourself toward the top of the mat into a high plank pose. Trying to find as much movement as you can through the spine. As you make your way forward, shift your heels back towards the back edge of the mat. Belly button stays lifted. And then bend the knees, send the hips up and back. Downward facing dog. Exhale, you settle. Inhale, heels lift. Exhale, bend the knees, gaze forward. Pause in this little crouched position. And then go ahead and lift the hips high up to the sky. And use that lift to round the spine towards the top of the mat, coming into your plank pose nice and slow. Unraveling the chest as the shoulders come over top the wrists. Pause, integrate, feel strong and long here through the spine. Just as we did in tabletop position, just with a little bit more strength here. Bend the knees, send the hips up and back, downward facing dog. Exhale, you settle. One more round. Inhale, heels lift. Exhale, bend the knees, gaze forward. Pause, and then lift the hips. Travel forward nice and slow, moving at your own pace. That allows you to create movement, create space, create strength. Pause in your high plank. And then bend the knees, send the hips back, downward facing dog. Exhale, you settle. Inhale, roll over the toes, drop the knees, coming back into your tabletop position. Bring those blocks back toward one another, so you're finding a more compact shape. And then inhale, that right leg lifts back behind you. Steady through the hips, reach through the heel as the shoulders draw down away from the ears. And then go ahead and open that hip as you drive the knee towards that right elbow. And then plant the foot outside the right hand. Bring those blocks up to their highest height. And then go ahead and settle the hips down as you gaze forward. Feel those hips kind of slinking down towards the floor, but still keeping a little lift within the low belly. Even though our stance is a little bit wider here, can you kind of draw that right hip back and underneath you a little bit more as that left hip comes forward, squaring off through the pelvis, through the hips. And then on that exhale, tuck the back toes, sit those hips back in space. Lift those right toes, come into half splits pose. And here again, can you pull that right hip crease underneath you just a little bit more. So you're almost like you're dragging that right heel onto the mat, into the earth. As you pull it back, feeling a little bit more sensation underneath that right leg. Still working through that nice long spine, using the blocks to help get you there. And then plant that right foot. Sink the hips down forward. It's okay if that knee comes in front of the toes, as long as it feels good for you. So feel free to really sink and settle into this shape. But still keeping a nice long spine. So you're still using the blocks to keep your chest lifted. You're still thinking about lifting through that lower belly. You're still thinking about reaching that tailbone down and away toward that back heel. So even when we find deeper expressions, we're still staying mindful of where our body is in space. What can we learn from where we are? And then we're going to go ahead and bring the blocks back down to their lower height. Hands come to the block, tuck the back toes. You're going to lift that right foot. You're going to pluck it off the floor and come back tabletop. Keeping the hands on the blocks, go ahead and sit your hips back towards your heels. Find a child's pose with your hands elevated. Maybe that gives you a little bit more room to sink the chest down. Let the hips settle. Find a wide child's pose, find a narrow child's pose, whatever calls to you. But wherever you are, you're still thinking of keeping the sides of your body nice and long. Thinking of the hip creases kind of drawing back toward those heels. Trying to feel that length within the sides of your body, even in this more compact shape. Breathing into the sides of the rib cage. And on your next inhale, you pull yourself back up into tabletop position. On your next inhale, once you settle, so settle first. Inhale, reach that left leg back behind you and hold. And then you're going to open the hip. You're going to drive that knee toward the left elbow. And then you're going to plant the left foot outside the left hand. If you want to scoot your right foot back, feel free to give you a little bit more space to settle in. And sink into your space here. Elevate the blocks as you need. If you feel like you are caving into your own space, lift those blocks up. Find height. Even in the depth of our hips, we're still able to find a little lightness. We're still able to grow from our base here. Maybe a subtle pull back of that left hip so that right hip can come forward just a hair more. See how that changes the sensation. Squaring off through the hips, belly buttons facing forward, and lift it. Find your breath. Let those shoulders soften away from the ears. And then lift through the low belly. Start to send the hips back in space, coming into half splits pose. Those left toes lift. Bring the blocks back toward you so you can still maintain and find that long spine. Maybe starting to dig that left heel down and into the mat as you pull that left hip back. Feeling that sensation deepen within the backside of that left leg. Still reaching the chest and heart forward. And feel how that pull back, that reach forward continues to give you a little bit more information, more sensation within that leg. Let the blocks drop down, drop the hips forward. Coming back into your low lunge. Hugging that left thigh in, drawing it back. Tall through the crown of the head. And then go ahead and drop the blocks back down. Tuck the back toes. Go ahead and pluck that left foot up and off the floor and then bring it back to meet the right. Settle those hips back, child's pose. Maybe bring the blocks onto a higher height here. Maybe you want a little bit more of a stretch to the shoulders through the upper back. It just gives you a little bit more through that space if you want it. Sending that breath into the belly, into the sides of the rib cage. Expanding through this space. And then go ahead and come back up on your next inhale whenever you're ready. And then go ahead and bring those blocks back to the edges of the mat. We're still in tabletop position, but we're going to bring our foot between the hands. So I want to make sure that you're giving yourself enough room to make that happen. So go ahead and find a nice long spine on your next inhale. That right leg lifts back behind you, square off those hips, reaching through the heel, reaching through the crown of the head. And then bend that knee, drive that knee towards the right collarbone, maybe rounding through the spine, finding that cat-like pose to place the right foot between the hands. Walk that left knee back just a hair. And then you're going to press through the blocks, adjust the blocks as you need, or maybe just come onto fingertips on the blocks. And look forward, lunge forward. Feel free to find a deep lunge in a way where that knee does track over that those right toes, if it feels comfortable for you. If for whatever reason it doesn't, we back off. Still squaring through the hips, trying not to reach that knee and let the chest spill over towards the left. We still want to get a nice sensation of compression within that right leg and space within the front of that left. So still thinking of keeping that right hip underneath you, even though that knee is reaching forward. And then we're going to come into a more structured shape. So I want you to bring the blocks on their tallest height, and then I want you to bring them close to you so you can come into a more lifted half kneeling or lunge position. So now that we're here, now that we're a little bit more lifted, knees over top of that ankle, hips are squared forward. You might need to drop that right hip crease down just a little bit to even things out. Blocks might still be a little far away from you as they are for me, so I just come fingertips to blocks. And with that back leg, so we're lifting through the belly, we're driving down through that left shin, the top of that left foot, and we're trying to lift up through that left hip bone and the low belly here, feeling a nice deep sensation within the front of that left thigh. If that feels good, but you might have a little bit more in you, maybe you have a subtle shift forward. Very small, just to deepen that sensation, but we're still lifting through the left hip, through the low belly. And then tuck the back toes, lift the back knee, send the hips back in space, come out of it for just a moment, send your hips back into a modified pyramid pose. Right toes can lift or they can stay planted, trying to ground down through that back heel, plugging that right hip back in space. Still keeping that spine nice and long. Adjust your blocks as you need to make that happen. And then go ahead and bend back through both legs. Let the back knee drop. Reposition your blocks and then come back up and into that half kneeling position. So drawing down through the lower leg and lifting through the front of the hip. Nice and tall within the spine. Maybe that left arm reaches up and overhead. And then maybe we reach that left arm over towards the right. Can we find a little bit more space and length through that left side waist? Up and back through the center. Hands come back to blocks. Shift those blocks forward, tuck the back toes, lift the back knee, send the hips back again, coming into extended pyramid pose. Reaching that tailbone back in space, hugging that right hip underneath. Plant the right foot, bend the back knee. Blocks frame that front foot. Press through the blocks, free up that right foot, pluck it off the floor, and then hug it in towards your belly before returning it back to tabletop position. And between rounds here, let's just shimmy our hips left to right, bumping the hips over towards the right as the chest stays the center, stretching out through that right side, and then over towards the other side, bumping those left hips, opening through the left side of the waist. And then go ahead and extend the left leg long. Integrate before we move forward. And then bend the knee, hug in, tuck it in. Find maybe a little cat pose to bring the left foot between the hands. And then from here, feel free to walk that right foot back. And then we're just finding a deep lunge here. As it feels good, maybe we use the blocks to kind of find a little bit more depth, but maybe a gentle press through the blocks helps us come out of it just a hair, enough to feel a little bit more comfortable. Play with what you need. And even in this more narrow stance, I still want you to try to work toward evening out those hips left to right versus letting the chest open towards the right side of the room. So we're still keeping the chest, the heart, the collarbones all facing forward. Trying to keep that left knee on track as well. And letting this feel good, just being mindful of your low back. So if we need a little bit more lift through the belly, if we need to lift out of it a little bit more, you have those options. Go ahead and bring the blocks a little bit closer to you as you come up and out into a half kneeling position. Grounding down through the back shin, the top of the back foot. As you lift through that right hip bone, you lift through the low belly. Fingertips to blocks. If you have another set of blocks, you stack even higher. Reaching that tailbone down toward the earth. Feeling a nice stretch sensation within the front of the hip if we need more. Maybe we squeeze that tush, the muscle, that glute muscle, that just a little bit tighter to help with that lift. Or maybe we just shift ever so slightly forward while maintaining that front lift of the hip, of the pelvis here. Don't make it any more or any bigger than it needs to be. Just feeling and focusing on that sensation and where we are in space. Then go ahead, adjust the blocks as you need. Tuck the back toes, lift the back knee, send the hips back, coming into extended pyramid pose. Trying to ground down through that back heel, plugging that left hip underneath you and adjusting the blocks as you need to feel nice and long within the spine. Plant the left foot, bend that right knee, drop it back and down behind you. Readjust the blocks, come back into that half kneeling position, untuck the toes, press down to lift through that right side. Be nice and tall here. So you're planted through that front foot. You're grounded down through that back leg. You're lifting everything up from that space, finding a nice tall spine, projecting that energy through the crown of your head. And stay here. If we want to add more, we reach that right arm up and overhead. Left hand stays on the block. And as we reach those right fingertips up and over towards the right, still grounding down through that right leg. Inhale up through center. Hands come back to blocks. Tuck the back toes, lift the back knee. Extended pyramid pose is where we move to. Left toes can be grounded or lifted. Whatever sensation you need or are looking for here. And think of keeping the back of the neck nice and long as well. It's not uncommon. I just noticed myself even doing it, is that we want to look up and look forward. All great, all well and good. But I'm crunching really hard through the back of my neck. Give your neck a break. Lengthen. Maybe gently bring that chin towards your throat. Reach the crown of the head toward the top of the mat. Bend back into the knees. Drop the back knee. Plant the blocks down. Press through the heels of the hands. Pluck that left foot up and off the floor as you tuck that thigh in towards your belly. Left leg comes to meet the right. And then bring the blocks toward the top of the mat. We're going to come into puppy pose this time, okay? So adjust the blocks as you need, whatever feels good to open up through the back. Maybe shimmy your hips back. Keep those hips over top the knees and drop all the way down. Dropping the forehead down. If this feels really big to do, you can always have your hands down onto the earth and maybe place a block underneath your forehead. If it feels really far away, you can have your hands down, forehead to a block. As long as it's not pushing your head back, you're resting nice and easy. You're just bringing the ground up to you. Breathing into the heart space, breathing into that space behind the heart, within the back of the rib cage. And then nice and easy, press and lift the chest. Go ahead and walk your knees towards the center of the mat. Drop hips to heels. Bring the blocks along your hips. And then just find a moment here to settle. Feeling the connection within your own body to the earth, to the mat. Blocks are set aside here for the moment. And I say that just before recommending, if this is a big space to sit into for you, you can always take advantage of the blocks and you can sneak that between your thighs and rest your sit bones onto the block. That might feel a little cozy. It might as well stay on theme and continue to use the blocks for a little bit of support. You can rest your palms on your thighs. If you want to feel more grounded, you can let the palms reach toward the sky. If you want to continue to take in the energy flowing around you. Just feeling the breath flow in and out of your body, hearing the subtle sounds that it makes as it passes through. And feeling a sense of calmness, softness, maybe even a little bit of heaviness start to settle into your space. And you're welcome to continue and stay here in this space if this feels good. Or if you want more of a supported conclusion to today's class, more following through with that heart-opening sensation, you're welcome to take those blocks and set yourself up for a nice supported, reclined space here. So I like to set my blocks up on 2 different heights. Adjust as you need, but that first block, keep your knees bent, but that first block is going to be just at the base of your shoulder blades. And then you're going to take that second block and rest the base of your skull, the flattest part of your head, onto there. And then just let the arms fall open. Knees can stay bent. Legs can straighten out. Or you can find a butterfly pose. If you want to be fully open and receptive. Wherever you are, I encourage you to close your eyes. Continue to reflect inward on the sensations within your body. And just fully letting go here in this moment. And letting the blocks fully support you wherever it is that you may be. Feeling the breath fill all the way through the belly, the rib cage, the chest, the throat. And then exhaling all of that air all the way out before you start fresh again. Bringing in all new air, fueling your body and creating space within the center of you. Wherever you are, I encourage you to stay here for another 5 to 10 more breaths before softly blinking those eyes open and coming back into your day. As always, I appreciate y'all for being here. I hope you enjoyed today's Slow Flow class. And please leave a comment, like, subscribe, and I look forward to seeing y'all next time. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day.